And again, if anyone else wants to co-sponsor that one, we can do that as well.
Yes.
Right here. Everybody.
And it's something that I know the administration had reached out to me on, that it's a lot of municipalities around the state through NICOM are requesting this, so we're trying to join with that. So, okay, thank you, Madam President.
You're welcome.
President Hudson, I was wondering, just if I could ask the Deputy Mayor, the new Corporation Council, does she officially start, or when does she start?
She's been on, I think, 3 weeks now almost.
Okay.
Yep.
So she isn't, we're waiting for Joe to get back to
Joe.
address some of these.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. She specifically requested she'd rather, you all meet with Joe, and Joe is back on Monday.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
It's good to hear.
Councilor Schultz.
Thank you, Madam President. I have number 21, to authorize the city to name a Director of Minority Affairs as the responsible local official and the primary equitable business opportunities login holder to represent the city to the New York State Department of Transportation EBO Civil Rights Reporting System, which is required by the federal aid projects. So, Mary, if you have more information.
Hi, Mary Robison, City Engineer. I'm speaking on this since we oversee all the TIP projects. This is really just a administrative piece. Lamont Mitchell used to be our person that handled all the EBO stuff, so now that he has left, that we are asking. And now the state requires a formal resolution appointing the person who will be doing this work.
Do we know who will be replacing Lamont yet?
Yes,
She's listed in the,
Johnson.
Oh, okay.
Yolanda.
Oh, great.
Yep, she started a couple weeks ago.
Oh, okay, great. I didn't know that.
Any questions?
What is this? What exactly does this database keep track of?
All the EEO and DBE requirements that the state requires on our federal transportation projects, the TIP projects I always talk to you guys about.
Gotcha.
I believe it also has all the certified payrolls. So, thank you.
thank you. I also have number 22, to appropriate funds from the ARPA monies, amount not to exceed $550,000, to enter into an agreement with Dover, Cole, and Partner to provide professional planning and design services regarding the New York State Department of Transportation removal of the I-81 viaduct, to ensure that the overall community grid project will facilitate redevelopment of strong neighborhoods and equitable development within the city once the viaduct is removed. And the mayor's waived the RFP process, so I'm sure Mr. Kearney can enlighten us even further.
Thank you, Councilor Schultz. Owen Kearney with the city's planning division. One point of clarity, though, the RFP process wasn't waived. There was an RFP process which a few councilors were involved in. And during that RFP process, the team unanimously selected Dover Cole. There were 3 submissions. It really was a nationwide search for these planning and design services relative to the 81 project. And I'll talk a little bit about what's included there. There were 3 submissions. The RFP committee met multiple times, unanimously selected Dover Cole, a firm out of Florida that really specializes in this work and has been involved in a few of these projects. Not only nationwide, but in New York State. They have been working on the Rochester Inner Loop project out there. So they've done similar work in New York State. Again, one of the reasons they were selected, not only for their expertise, but for their work in upstate New York. The request is to authorize an amount not to exceed $550,000 for a 3-phased approach, and the request letter identifies those 3 phases. Phase 1, really evaluating the current 81 project. This is a firm that will be working closely with the city for approximately 2 years or more as we get into the planning and design and our close work with New York State Department of Transportation relative to 81. The 3-phased approach, first phase includes really working closely with the city and residents on the current design and interaction with New York State DOT. The second phase, and really the bulk of this work and the majority of the fee, goes to the development of a vision plan for the 81 corridor. And I'll read a little bit about that. I imagine that is an area folks have questions. What exactly is the focus of this plan? The vision plan will visualize and facilitate the community's ambition for the I-81 and the city of Syracuse for generations. The vision plan will be developed concurrently with an interactive public engagement process across a wide spectrum of stakeholders, elected officials, community and business leaders, as well as other major institutions. The vision plan will ultimately include proposals for a reconnected street network, including improvements to multimodal mobility, pedestrian and bike infrastructure, in coordination with public transit, strategies for the built environment, including neighborhood and historic preservation, economic growth, development, public and open space, and affordable housing, as well as implementation strategies. The vision plan will be based upon and created through the constant lens of equity, including a robust strategy to protect existing residents from displacement and a method for creating opportunities for equitable economic growth, social and environmental justice, and particular considerations for those impacted by I-81's initial construction. Obviously, a lot of details there, but essentially it's looking at the 81 project footprint in the city, not only Almond Street, but Krause Irving, West Street, the portions to the north, and developing a plan for how this will not only impact the city, but how the city and this community should react to that huge investment, and what are strategies to do that equitably and effectively. So a lot of information there. Happy to answer detailed questions. Phase 3, I should mention before I turn it over, is an implementation plan. You know, we've developed this vision plan. How do you go about hitting the ground running and implementing the plan? So that's the 3-phased approach. A lot of details there, but happy to talk and answer questions about that.
Will they be managing the RFP process for construction?
So this is a team that will be hired by the city using the ARPA funds and will work directly with the city, and so that there won't be an additional RFP for this work.
So is there overlap between the public comments and assessments that have already been done, obviously to get us to where we are with the I-81 and this? Like, how does that differ?
Well, that process has been robust. There's a lot of comments that the state has received. This is a team that will review that. That is the context by which the community comments received is really the jumping off point on the development of the Vision Master Plan. How is New York State reacting to that with their infrastructure development, the I-81 project? And what are the projects that the city needs to consider? Where are the investments the city needs to make? What are the concerns that the city and city residents have? And develop a plan to navigate that. It's sort of a concurrent path along with the New York State's work. We kind of need to do our own work here at the city to be prepared for that infrastructure that's being built right through the center of our community. And this is a plan to work with a team that has done that elsewhere and that is proposed to work with us to do it here. Not only all of us, but the folks in our community.
And that had to wait until now, right? Until all of those plans are in place so that we now know the impact it's going to have so that we can...
We feel that this is the most effective time to do this rather than 2 years ago or potentially, a year or two from now, that this is a good time to start this work.
Okay.
Also, COVID, really threw
Yeah.
everything for a loop. We didn't know what the state's timeline was, and so it was very hard to adapt. But I would say to your question that, it will definitely be incorporating all the comments and public input that's come so far, and there's aspects of it that will be soliciting more comments and more conversations with community stakeholders to try to develop the plan.
Especially
And
about
it'll put us
areas.
in an advantageous position, I imagine, because the state won't have any plan for that property, and we will, correct?
Right.
That's
Right.
correct.
That's the goal, is to have a
Right.
proactive city plan
Right.
to, go along with the state's plan to have our own vision that we're trying to articulate.
Okay, last question, if you don't mind. So when's the last time, if ever, the city's done a vision master plan and a strategic action plan? For that area?
For that area, I mean, the city has a comprehensive plan that was completed about 8 years ago that was a citywide focus. We've recently done some planning in the Salt Springs neighborhood with Lemoyne. We're currently doing the local waterfront planning out in the Inner Harbor. So we've done those neighborhood scale plans, but I think this is unique, and it's not something that I've been a part of during my time at the city. It's really a plan, I don't want to say reacting to, but taking into account a $1 billion plus investment in our community. And as Councilor Driscoll mentioned, Councilor Hogan mentioned, really kind of getting our ducks in a row and our house in order to develop strategies that we need to implement around that work, whether they're neighborhood scale, whether they're infrastructure, public amenities, economic development, affordable housing. This is really going to evaluate all of those themes as it relates to the implementation of the state's I-81 project.
As we contemplate rezone, which was, the zoning was last done in 1967, correct?
That's correct.
We have to be careful with rezone. We have to be real careful.
I know.
I'm going to keep pushing that issue.
Well, we're going to address it too. But I mean, it's something, at least we're ahead of the curve on this one, so
That's correct.
commend you on that.
Oh, and I have a question. In phase 2, I see you said your primary focus is on the downtown area and more of the university area for 81. And I just want to mention that this 81 project is going to affect not just that, but the whole entire city of Syracuse. And I want to make sure that they're a part of it. It's not just the one section of the city. It's going to affect the whole city. So make sure that, in phase 2 is not even really mentioned in it. It's really primarily, it says Almond, Krause, Adam, and downtown really part of Syracuse, but it's really going to affect the whole city of Syracuse. Yes. So.
Understood, and that's something that we've communicated, the whole 690 corridor, particularly immediately south of really much of the area south of downtown, Krause Irving, West Street, 690. These are all areas that will be included in the plan. Almond Street being kind of the anchor location, but all of these areas citywide will be included in the plan.
For the whole city, only why I mention this, because the whole city will be affected once everything gets transitioned and changed. It's not just going to be that. It's going to change the whole Salina. It's going to change the whole Colvin. It's going to change the whole Fayette Street. So we have to make sure we move that farther out than just that area. It needs to capture the whole community, and they need to be a part of it. Okay?
Understood.
And I also think that needs to be written in the plan as well. I think just remind.
Okay.
Owen, just for clarification purposes, when we are trying to embark on something like this, where does FHA and DOT in terms of the plan of I-81 come in financial with stuff like this?
Their financial relation to this?
Because I would assume that taking on a project this large would warrant some resources in planning and other stuff. And I'm wondering, with us taking a proactive measure like this, would there be any reimbursement in the future, or have we looked into DOT funding something like this and FHA funding something like this, as opposed to us using ARPA money?
Good question, Councilor. And a question that Councilor Schultz raised on the side also. So the proposals to use ARPA funding, ultimately federal dollars for this work, the city has greater control over the plan. The FHWA, the federal government, the state government, and DOT will obviously be in control of the 81 project, be leading that project. And this is an opportunity for the city to do our own evaluation, our own planning, our own design, and have greater control of it using city ARPA dollars. Now, that's great. Sometimes there's a willingness to maybe give up a little control if somebody else provides some funding, but in this case, that was the decision was made. And the other point worth mentioning is the feds and New York State hasn't provided any opportunities for funding this type of work. It's not typically done on highway projects. It wasn't done, and to my knowledge, isn't going to be made available. So again, rather than wait for the possibility of those funds, the city is requesting to allocate these funds under our control, to hire our own consultant, and to really identify what is the vision for this corridor, and do the public engagement process we want, follow the schedule we want. Ultimately, it gives us a lot more control.
Okay, which for me, I'm trying to understand, because with the, I see the value of the study. I see the value, it's obviously important. But I'm trying to think of, the redundancy that we may be embarking on, in terms of the I-81 study. It was extensive, right? And our community engaged, they gave their comments. And I'm wondering if there could be a way we could use that study to really mirror what we want to do here. I mean, half of it, 550,000. That's in it with the city, with the financial condition we have. I feel like we could use a little bit different strategy to abstract what we need.
Understood, and I don't disagree. It's not an insignificant amount of money, but the work that New York State has done and continue to do, things looking at reconnecting the street network, looking at bike and pedestrian infrastructure beyond the project limits, looking at economic development opportunities, looking at land becoming available, looking at affordable housing, looking at potential displacement issues. These are things that New York State is touched upon some of these things, but this is an effort to do a deep dive on those issues and develop a plan on how we, the city, intend to address them. So the consultant will review all of New York State's work to date. We'll hopefully perhaps use some of that data that's relevant, but it's really the development of a plan focused with your input, with the city team's input, and with resident input on a host of issues that DOT has done some work with, but we're gonna further that work because we feel it's valuable. Those issues are valuable to identify.
And I'm gonna ask a silly question, because I know it's gonna get shot down. Mary Vossler, is any Mary Robertson? Oh, whoa.
Boss ain't been here for a minute.
Y'all was supposed to hit me.
A Freudian slip, I guess.
supposed to hit me. Just a curious question, because I know it's all related to the highways and the roads. So I'm gonna ask this simple, silly question. Is any Marcia Shelley attached with any of this?
In terms of the 81 project?
81, 690 West Street, that's all roads. So I'm just curious if Marcia Shelley is attached.
I don't know if they're getting Marchicelli money. I know we're in April, the SMTC Planning and Policy Committee will be meeting to vote on the appropriation or approval of the funding for the project. We can ask at those meetings if Marchicelli, I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know if they use Marchicelli on their own projects or if that's just for local municipalities. Do you know Councilor Hogan?
Just got up. This could be something.
I know. What's up?
Oh, no, he's bad.
Mr. Budget Director.
Yeah.
I was just curious to know if any of that would apply to these projects.
I'll find out if I can before those April meetings, but if not, I'll ask at the planning committee.
Here he comes.
Here he comes.
I think my really simple understanding from Tim Rudd, Budget Director, from following all this is that no offense to Owen, he's got a lot on his plate, but we don't have a huge urban planning division. So this is our attempt at having our own consultant to give us our own perspective, which will be a unique and different perspective than the state or the feds. And we do have the opportunity because of the federal relief money, and we probably wouldn't have had this opportunity without it. So we're able to use that. So it is all ARPA money. There's no Marcia Shelley or anything else. It's just us using our ARPA money to hire awesome urban planning professionals to help us advocate, to do some public outreach along for our own advocacy. But it's really to have a city-centric voice that we can use. And I would say that's like the shortest justification.
This outfit is a major league player in urbanism and all that.
No,
They're
I
out
said
of
on the
here.
RFP.
So I can't think of a better way to use, I think this is what American Rescue Plan money was for, basically. You know, look ahead and plan for the future. Obviously, there was no plan when they went through the 15th Ward in
Right.
the 60s, so.
I think
that was
that's,
the plan.
Yeah,
I think that's why this is such a valued thing. There's so much talk about the scars that highway has left in that neighborhood. So I think it's very important that we be intentional, particularly around economic development and housing in that area, to make sure we, to the best of our ability, restore a neighborhood rather than further damage it. I think it's going to be, obviously the 81 project is going to be disruptive
so
for
if any
folks
of
who
you
live in that
councilors want to
corridor.
write letters to the state asking for that land, let's go.
Yep.
That's what I was standing up here to say. Parcels of property that are going to be available.
Right, letters.
Both south of immediately here, but also just north in that 690 Krause Irving intersection, that we need to be in a position to have
Yes.
a strategy for how we can make the argument for how that land that we will not own until it can be conveyed to us can be used in an effective manner to help our city. This process will help us get there. Also, we'll also be talking about people in this thing, the workforce. We've been doing a lot of work on the workforce. We've been doing a lot on business development. So we'll also be looking at quite a few areas that we can do. Tim summed it up. I'm not going to reiterate, just to say that there are many players talking about a significant impact in the city center, and we need to be also have our professionals. This company is nationally and world-renowned known to be able to guide us through a process that, for the first time in many of our lives, we're in a position to have this kind of effect on our community.
So this is only for them to do the actual planning, right? So after we receive the plan from them, I'm assuming that there's going to be some suggestions of things that we need to do, not just related to the land that's underneath the viaduct, but just in the surrounding area. So where is that money going to come from for us to be able to actually implement the plan?
That's exactly right. They will deliver a plan. And phase 3 is a specific implementation strategy. Here's how you go about doing X, Y, and Z, which is even a step further. But your point is correct, Councilor Allen. It doesn't provide funding for infrastructure improvements. That is something that we will have to work with state and federal funds, local city dollars, project partners. It'll probably be a variety of funding sources, whether that's, economic development, could be potentially private dollars, supplemented by city funds, but acquisition of property, affordable housing, transit improvements, mobility improvements, all of these things would be a variety of different sources, and that would be up to the city, like many different capital improvements and projects would be up to us to find funding for.
So hopefully, Director Rudd, you'll be here then in a couple of years. So realistically though, when we look at our budget, where are we going to pull those funds from? Just realistically. I understand what you're saying, but
yeah, I
don't
think
have the money.
The short answer is that these
funds we would have a document to give us the backing to go seek funding. We would have to look for outside funding for many of these projects.
So it's still going to be tight. We're still going to be.
And I would think, Councilor Allen, if I could, just that a lot of this is the hope that the state and federal money that comes in here, we give it some direction to where to go. So a lot of the money we'd be hoping would be coming from state and federal, hopefully, on a lot of these concepts, and giving them a vision, because a lot of people have been talking about that aspect of getting it right this time. So I think they will be supportive of city plans, but we have to present them first. That would be my hope.
And it's important to note, it's hard to plan for those things because we don't exactly know what those recommendations are. I think some of us probably have a sense of some of those things, but you have to do the planning first to identify and then begin setting aside either city funds, seeking other state or federal dollars. So, but you're right, none of this is it's important if we're going to do the work to think about funding the follow-up.
Yeah.
I think it'd be an opportunity for our state legislators to get behind this plan and do something for the neighborhoods of the city, because back in the 1960s, it certainly didn't happen that way.
At all. And I want to ask you on, before you sit down again, when you talked about the infrastructure, I want to know, I know the infrastructure around the highway, I know the infrastructure on 690 when you're talking about it. How far does the infrastructure work go? Does it go down Salina Street, State Street corridor? How far is this infrastructure going to go?
Of the state's project.
Yes.
It's
Curbing and all of that good stuff. How far?
It's going to be limited to their project work area. So it's not, whether it's Almond Street or 690. I think those plans, that's something that DOT is currently developing. But it's to the extent that it's going to be limited to the area they need to work on.
So
are they going to go 3 blocks?
Because as Councilor Caldwell said, you're talking about a big disruption, not just in that Almond Street. If you go down Salina Street, you're rerouting traffic. So all of that's going to change. So there's no infrastructure money from them to help us rebuild those corridors?
I can't comment on whether that is available or will be available, but your point about the areas adjacent to their project and in between Almond Street, where they're going to be doing significant work, and Krause Irving, 5-6 blocks away, there's a whole area in between there. This plan is a start to begin thinking about how their work, their infrastructure work, will impact these surrounding areas. How do we react to that? How do we plan accordingly for those areas?
So are you looking at like Elk and State and
Even
all of those
Garfield.
areas going that way?
Right. Right. Work around Colvin, work around
Right.
West Street, work around Burt up to Erie Boulevard East. It's a big project footprint. We're, again, getting, I think, a good way to return to this is the work that we're proposing here begins to think about all of those issues that we need to start thinking about, accommodate. How will transit be affected? How will pedestrian safety be affected? How do we reconnect our city street grid to their infrastructure projects?
Because Deputy Mayor, when you talk to DOT again, because now that I'm looking at it, the roundabout is not coming down by King School. The roundabout is
It's at
going
Van
further
Buren.
down.
It's at Van Buren.
Right, so that's going to be a total disruption going up that corridor. So when you talk to the state, would you ask them what they plan to do about that infrastructure going along that whole Garfield area going down?
So we had a conversation with the DOT yesterday. Many of us were there. It was the first time for them to, before the launch of the final environmental impact study, to give us the construction timeline in the various areas. What they called ground zero is not the viaduct, it's right here. It's that 690 where Krause and a new Irving is going to be created, headed right into where 690 is right now. A lot of bridge work, a lot of road work going to happen. Owen is right. What their project had is the exact footprint. I know where you're going, Counselor, is that the rerouting of the traffic. We had this conversation yesterday. We're going to set up a series of ongoing meetings about this. Communication is going to be key, and the wear and tear on our roads as we figure out rerouting. I don't want to send everything heading north on 81 through Salina and State Street. I don't want to do that. So we have to have conversations about as the phases are completed, and there are components of that entire project that will be available for traffic use, how the traffic impact will be rerouted throughout the city. And yesterday I had a oh my God moment, because in the full construction project for the first phase, which is 5 areas, 3 of those are going to be happening at the same time. And so this is, we've been waiting and waiting for this, and now it's here, and now I'm like completely like, oh my God. So a lot of conversations going on. I just, I don't want to feel like what's going to happen is going to be like me trying to get to downtown to my daughter through the parade on Sunday, just having to reroute all over the place. So it is major conversations, major.
And I appreciate that, because now the more I think about it and I'm looking down that corridor, they can't just stay stuck, and I hear what you're saying on about the other sections, but you're gonna affect the whole swath of people when you start talking about that highway from the projects all the way through Garfield. That's gonna truly affect those neighborhoods.
So in phase one, for example, one area that will, when you think about Garfield, we had this conversation yesterday, was Colvin. That's gonna be redeveloped. And there is a proposal now for the continued on-ramp, but a new off-ramp. And the impact of that traffic at that intersection, and I think of coming off of Garfield now trying to turn left. And so I brought that up yesterday.
Okay.
So those are the conversations. Does Garfield, even as we continue to talk about this and we get experts like Neil and other transportation experts, do we even continue a left turn option off of Garfield? We're gonna have a lot more traffic coming down Colvin than is currently there, and you can barely turn left off of Garfield now.
But I need to go left because I gotta drop my kids off. So don't change
I
that.
remember that, Councilman.
Put a stoplight right there.
I remember that.
But seriously
And
though,
we have
'cause-
talked about traffic lighting and what other components we need to have
Because
there.
coming off of Garfield, if there's a funeral at Tucker and they're going down Garfield to the cemetery Oakwood, I can't get out my driveway.
Right.
So it's gonna be crazy when the highway comes down. And when you're at that stop sign at Garfield and Colvin, you forget about it. Like at least 5 minutes you're waiting, unless somebody is nice enough to let you out to go up the hill. It's crazy.
One of the initial things will be a communication center that they're looking for a location for, where people can, similar to what was at Carnegie, where people can go. What was proposed, we're posting our own 81 person whose job will be coordinating these millions of meetings that are going to happen. And they proposed actually yesterday whether or not we co-locate those individuals, so everyone around this is in the same location. So it is, it's like Christmas. We've been waiting for it and it's here. And now we have to deal with all the wrapping paper at the end of the day.
One more question for you, Deputy Mayor. When you say you met with DOT, okay, can I ask, is our transportation counselor on that committee?
So it wasn't a committee meeting or anything like that?
No, I know it wasn't, but we have a...
No, we're going to set up a series of meetings with people, our transportation individual, is that still?
No.
That's Jen.
It's just
Sorry, switched up on me. Yes.
There's 4 of us. We have a committee.
Okay. Yes. So as we set that up, and especially get this person on board, because it cannot be Greg Lowe. That's who it is right now.
Okay, so we need to keep
Yes,
her in the
in
loop.
loop, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
I have one more question, Owen. Sorry to keep bothering you.
Not Sharon Owens, Owen.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So I just want to understand this. This project is several phases, right?
Correct.
And each phase, we're paying part of the ARPA money for this company to come in and tell us what we know is going to happen, right?
Listen and make recommendations.
Make
Yes.
recommendations for something that the state is going to do, right? So
Yes, essentially react to evaluate the state's project and make recommendations to the city as to what we need to do on our adjacent streets relative to transit, public safety, access, wear and tear, all of the housing, economic development, green space, right.
So basically, it's just, they're gonna give us what we feel that needs to be done in this community, but then how is that gonna relay back to the state?
So the work, and this, getting back to Councilor Allen's point, are largely going to be a series of recommendations about our community that the city is going to have to implement. And we may work with a variety of different partners to do that, but it's also, it's very much going to be a to-do list for the city, based on public input, based on their design expertise, based on, evaluation of the state's plan. But it's largely going to be things that we need to do. We need to find partners to do it with. We need to find funding to do it with. But it's really the start of a larger process is this planning work.
So does the state have someone they're working with that's designing what we're doing here?
They have a whole host of firms that they're working with on engineering, design, planning. And as the deputy mayor mentioned, we're starting to meet with them to coordinate. And we have been meeting with them, but their planners and designers are not necessarily the same group we're working with.
And I just want to emphasize that there are two parallel tracks going here. One is the DOT, and it is all road work, streets, sidewalks, that right-of-way infrastructure. What we're proposing here is that around and about all of that is going to be affecting our community when it comes to traffic, when it comes to pedestrians, when it comes to biking, when it comes to green space, economic opportunity, available land. It's one thing to say, DOT, give us that land because, you know, the city can use it. It's better to have a plan for what we propose for it.
And on that note, I think we'll call this item very, very, very ready. Thank you.
I would say like just one thing before we pass, like one of the items that, to give councilors an example of some of the issues, like the size of the lanes of the proposed grid or the side of the sidewalks. Like the state might be looking for, you know, their focus is moving traffic as quickly as possible. We're looking at it as a neighborhood. How wide do we want our sidewalks? How wide do we want these lanes? You know, how slow is the traffic going to be moving? How, you know, so their priority is you know, mostly moving the vehicles and we're looking at community. You know, so,
I agree. I'm not against it. I just wanted to make sure that
Yeah.
we're looking at the whole piece because it's going to affect so much bigger than what's written on that paper. It's going all the way to Seneca Turnpike
Absolutely.
and not farther. So
Yep.
that's all.
No, absolutely.
Great points.
All righty. And with that, Counselor Hogan.
Thank you, President Hudson. Good job, Councilor Schultz, on that. I'm only kidding. 23, 24, and 25, I have, item 23 is, of course, our application of our Community Development Block Grant. We'll be tabling that because we'll be voting on that in April. 24 is an approve district plan amendment for Planned Institutional District. Who do I have? Heather here?
Yes, I'm here. Good afternoon, councilors. Item 24 is a planned institutional district plan amendment, and this is one of SU's sub-districts, and they wanted to include an additional accessory use. This is the Marshall Square Mall, and initially when they changed the business class A zoning to their planned institutional district, did not include all the uses that may or may not have been in the mall, so they're including a service use with this amendment. So it's a small, I say small amendment, but as far as uses are concerned, because some of them are existing, retail, restaurant, and now service.
What is service?
Barbershop, nails, things that, you know, you would, instead of exchanging money for a good, you get a service.
Any other questions, Councilor Driscoll? Nope. Councilor Allen, do you have any questions? This is for the board in your district, okay? We have item, and then that's ready, thank you.
Okay.
And we have item 25, this is a mystifying designation of this property as a protected site at 736, 742, but I'm used to mystifying situations like this when it comes to the Planning Commission and the Landmark Preservation Board.
Yes, this is a result of a demolition proposal at this property, which triggered the designation process by which the Preservation Board recommended designation of this as a protected site. And the Planning Commission confirmed their recommendation and recommended to you that this be a local protected site.
Both myself and Councilor Schultz spoke against this. We recognize the need, obviously, for this project that St. Joseph's is contemplating doing, which would address the mental health crisis we have across the nation. I commend them on doing that. They have went out and got over $17 million worth of funding from the state, combined to $17 million from their parent company. It'd be a $35 million new facility that would deal with, like I said, some people in need. So it's always amazing to me when people drive by James Street and people on the Landmark Preservation Board will just say, you know what, that should be a protected site. But when somebody wants to develop the property, all of a sudden that triggers that. So it's an interesting procedural thing. Kate, do you want to say anything here? Or?
Can you first, Councilor Hogan, can you clarify, so you were against the protected site or you're against St. Joe's?
No, I'm against the protected site.
Okay.
We'd have to vote
Protecting it,
no
which-
on this
Okay.
in order for the project that St. Joe's has proposed to go
gotcha.
forward.
They're proposing to knock it down and rebuild something that can accommodate the $33 million worth of mental health money that they got to serve the area.
But
So
they're unable to do it because it's a protected site at the moment.
Right.
they're trying to get it designated protected. Kate, you can speak.
Sure, thank you. Kate Atwater, I'm the preservation planner for the city. I just want to note that the preservation ordinance is written such that when there is a demolition proposal for a property that's on our historic properties list, that there is a pause and that the Landmark Preservation Board is given the opportunity to focus specifically on the building, the property. They do not consider the worthiness of the alternative proposal for the site. It is very narrowly focused, very narrowly focused on the historic character, the story behind this particular property. I did send out to the council the local protected site application for your review, as well as the resolution which spelled out the reasons why the LPB, in its narrow focus on this property, felt that it met 3 of the criteria for designation. And that is the LPB's role in this process. And you, as the council, have a larger plate of issues that you can look at and consider. However, I will say that it is an important role that the Landmark Preservation Board plays, and we are, the Landmark Preservation Board, our preservation program is trying to get out there and, as I say, be able to provide additional information to the community about projects that may involve demolition of properties that have historic significance. So,
President Hudson?
Yeah, thank you, Kate. I appreciate that, and I appreciate all you do at the Preservation Board. But for me, I'm looking at this quarter, okay, because I work in that quarter. And that whole quarter is a service quarter where you have all types of non-for-profits rendering services. And right now, mental health is huge on our radar in the city of Syracuse. So to have a facility that would do inpatient on that quarter, I think that's a win-win for the city of Syracuse. So I don't have a vote, but if I did, I would probably vote no. So.
Yeah. And what's incredibly ironic here is that that was a mansion before, there was a mansion
that's
there.
correct.
And obviously the Landmark Preservation Board let that be demolished for this 1962 building.
If I can just correct the record there, that the Landmark Preservation...
I wasn't trying to put something on the record, but it's just ironic that there was a mansion there.
There was a mansion. In fact, it was the Sedgwick House, which was... it was an important one. It was prior to the Landmark Preservation Board and the Preservation Ordinance when that building came down. Whether or not it would have come down at that time, it is ironic because many in this community may not remember those mansions along James Street, but it was one of our original mansion rows, and it got caught up in the whole urban renewal era. The mansions were largely vacant, and there was a big push to create this office corridor, and a lot of residential, obviously the high-rise residential went up in the 1960s. We are at a period though where those demolitions took place in the 50 and 60 years ago, which is sort of the tipping point when we start to look at the historic nature of the buildings.
But it's not a historic designation or anything. And
Sorry.
you're trying for a protected site, but there's no historic designation.
No.
National Historic Society.
There's not that, but there is our local designation
Okay.
process.
You know, Kate, I'm gonna, if I could, I would like to ask Kristen Heath to come. Just give us a thumbnail sketch of what you're going to do up at St. Joseph's going to offer there. I appreciate you coming here.
Yeah,
too.
no, thank
I
you.
appreciate your commitment to the community, too.
Thank you for having me. Some of you know me, but some of you don't. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. I did want to note that I think Kate said that the project was a protected site. It's not a protected site in its current state at all. There's no designation around that facility in any way, shape, or form. What did trigger it was our request to demolish the property. And I'm very emotional about this project, so I just forgive you a little bit on this. It's been a 5-year journey for us. We are, as you know, St. Joseph's, incredibly dedicated to the provision of mental health and behavioral health services in this city. We have been for a very long time. We by far provide the majority of services to the Medicaid population and the underserved. And we have always done that. Since we acquired that site in the 90s, we've been providing outpatient behavioral health services there, and that's also where our administration of our behavioral health services is located. And what we're proposing is just 2 steps back, we know that we've had pretty significant challenges. I don't have to tell you guys, you deal with this far more, I think, on a day-to-day granular basis with your constituents than I could even tell you, right? The challenges that our patients are facing in terms of the community, in terms of their transition out of our inpatient facilities at the hospital into the community, right? So we have the outpatient services to support them, but that transition from crisis is something that is missing in terms of a care continuum for all of us. And we've only seen that accentuated with the pandemic, unfortunately. And so several years back, we saw that was coming, right? We're the provider of these services. We knew this was a looming crisis, and we went out and sought grant funding. I got to be honest, I did not think we had a chance in heck of getting it. We were asking for $16.95 million. I wrote almost every word of that grant application myself, another reason why you think I'm emotional about this. And we were awarded one of the largest capital grants the state has ever given for behavioral health services ever. To provide these services. And really what that project is to construct 24 units of crisis residence housing on the site. So we would demolish the existing building, and in its place we would reconstitute administration in a smaller footprint within the facility and build these crisis residence housing units, which are community-based supportive housing. They're voluntary, so they're not involuntary, unlike a CPAP where you are involuntarily committed. You are there because you want to be there, right? You're experiencing some form of crisis. You need pretty significant and serious supports to transition from crisis to the community, and that's exactly what these programs are for. There are very few of them in the community. There are very few of them in the state. There are very few of them in the country, although you're seeing a growing demand, really, and a discussion around these types of services.
Does it cover cross-addiction along with mental health?
We do. So St. Joseph's is not a predominant provider of, say, substance abuse services, but we do have a good number of those programs cross-referenced into our outpatient services, and those are programs that we are required by the state to incorporate into the crisis stabilization services. So this is short-term, voluntary-based, transitional housing. We would be building a new facility in place of what is, and again, my emotionality, a crumbling facility that we have poured hundreds of thousands of dollars in over the years to try to keep going. And the only reason we've done that is to continue to try to provide those services on site. And part of the reason why we've been committed to that site is because the city residents need those services. We have 50 people that walk to those services every day for some of our day services. We know the preponderance of our patients come from a certain radius within the city. We are definitely serving the city, and that's why we've been committed to preserving that. It's come to a point where we just can't do that anymore, partially because the hospital itself, we just don't have the finances to keep propping up a building that is crumbling. It floods, The glass structure in front raises the temperature of the offices to over 100 degrees. Our HVAC system can't keep up. There is no fire. It's dangerous for the city, quite frankly. There's no fire egress in or out of the parking structure in that building. You can't get through there. The building is not sprinklered. EMS has to take people up and down the stairs versus the elevators because they're not up to code. We have done so much to try to keep providing services there. But right before we got the grant, we had done a facility master plan and determined that we could not continue to invest. We just couldn't. And so we were really in a crisis. No, I don't want to overuse the word, but at that point in time, and then honestly, I'm not saying that there's a correlation that we're a Catholic health system, but thankfully we got the grant funding and we were able to say, we can save this property, right? We can do something here. We can keep these services here. And so we doubled down and proposed this solution to construct this facility on a site that is already used to behavioral health services in the community, a site where, as the city will tell you, we are already called upon frequently to improve the safety and security of that neighborhood. We do additional security patrols, and we're talking about building a facility that would be integrated with the character of the neighborhood, that would provide additional lighting, security, safety for the neighborhood, even above what we're doing now. So in terms of the building itself, that would be an improvement. And I will tell you what has been very disheartening, and I probably shouldn't traipse into this spot, but I do just want to make a mention. Kate mentioned the narrow scope of the Preservation Board. But I will tell you, when the Preservation Board examined this project, and the board members verbatim said, we do not care about the community, we only care about the project. That was said at a December 10th board meeting. That is their purview, yes, to talk about the facility, but there has to be some consideration going forward for how the community is impacted by these projects. There has to be. So I just, if there's any other questions I can answer for you about the funding, about the project, about our commitment, I'm happy to do so.
How many people will you be housing? I mean, what would be your capacity?
So it's 24 units of two kinds of, one's a little bit shorter term and one's a little bit longer term, so it's up to 30 days of housing, but one's a little bit shorter. And the exact designation of whether it's 10 and 14 or 9, or we haven't quite figured out yet, yes.
Are there any other questions? I am, of course, going to vote no against the protected site, and I imagine you might have a lot of support on the council here.
Oh, yeah.
And Kristen,
Want some tissue?
I almost do. I hope you don't mind. I just, yes, I really appreciate you being open to my comments.
I want to recognize Mark Murphy, too, who came here from St. Joe's, too, as the vice president. So I appreciate this, Kristen, and we
Thank you
appreciate
so much.
your commitment to the community.
Thank you. And I just want to also say I am available at any time if you do have additional questions between now and any other time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So I will call all these ready. Thank you, President Hudson.
Thank you. Councilor Majuk.
Thank you, Madam President. I have item 26 through 32. The first item, does anyone has any question? Because we beat it up pretty bad, pretty good, I mean. We had the committee meeting. So anyone with questions? Okay, I'll call that ready. Item 27. Chief Mont?
Hello, I'm Michael Mons, I'm the fire chief. Hi, Madam President. Hello, everybody. These 4 items are items that were needed to adhere to our vehicle replacement fleet program. That's a part of our 6-year capital plan. The plan is to get a vehicle that is to respond to rescue calls, to hazardous materials calls. We have some incident command vehicles we're going to get, and a few support vehicles. Part of this money is going to be $320,000 of bonded money, and the other half of this request is $431,000 of cash money. We're looking to get these things on the docket now due to the supply chain. So does anybody have any questions regarding these items?
So how many of these do we have, Chief?
We have a fleet, and we have a replacement program. I'm lucky to have one of the subject matter experts in fleet management for fire services He's our Deputy Chief, Zach Smith. He kind of oversees our fleet program. He helps other fire departments maintain their fleet and give directions when there are issues. But I'll bring Zach up to ask some of these specific questions that you have regarding the fleet and our replacement program.
Good afternoon, Zach Smith.
So talk to us about this fleet that we are replacing.
The fleet we're replacing, so we're talking about the light fleets, the support vehicles, the incident command vehicles. Due to time constraints, trying to get these things ordered now, we're still looking at maybe 2 years before we actually see these vehicles in service. If you look, it's a 23 Ford F-550. To place the order this year, to hopefully get it at the end of next year, to put the body on it, we're talking early 2024 to put this in service. The vehicles those will be replacing are 2015, 2016 vehicles that are running every day right now. Finding parts for those is fun, and then trying to project forward and buy vehicles in the future. We're caught in the supply chain issue like everyone else. So we'll be a little bit behind for replacing the vehicles currently in service. We try to get rid of the light fleet around 10 years with city service and running 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. We need to move those down the road at like the 10-year. These vehicles will be coming in and moving the smaller fleet out at like the 12, 13, 14 year. And then we're talking super cost prohibitive between the rust, finding parts for these vehicles. So that's the plan.
Are we close to replacing what we needed to replace, Chief? Because I know have been working hard on this to make sure that they are up to date and efficient.
Yep. When I became the chief in 2018, we were behind the 8 ball. Getting with Zach Smith, we came up with a plan. One year we didn't even buy any light fleet because we were worried about our heavy fleet, which are our larger fire trucks. So one year we didn't even buy these types of vehicles. So we've been speaking after we can get this legislation through, put these purchases in. Next year we'll be back to a strict replacement vehicle program, and we no longer will be able to, we'll have to play catch up anymore. It'll be a regular replacement program that is going to keep our spending down. It's going to help us with repair costs and all those types of things. So we've been trying to get to a point where we can get on track up to par with where our fleet needs to be for our city. After this year's purchasing, we will be at that point going forward. And then we'll just be asking for the minimum needs in our vehicle replacement program so we don't get behind in the future like we were in the past.
Question, comments? All right. Thank you, Chief.
Okay, thank you all. Have a good day.
Hi, Councilors. Joe Cecil, First Deputy Chief. Who decided on putting this podium here? This thing's like 6 foot tall.
We thought you would appreciate it.
I knew it was you, Councilor.
So he can look over the top.
So number 30 is pretty cut and dry. It's the New York State Governor's Traffic Safety Committee grant that we get every year. It's for $46,000. There's no match required. This is the grant we use. We send traffic officers, mostly traffic officers, out there to do enforcement for seatbelt, aggressive driving, distracted driving, cell phone use, and other behaviors that make it more dangerous for the cars.
So this just covers extra details to focus on those issues specifically?
It is. It's absolutely that. Separate details. Yep, extra.
Can I just ask really quickly how you reduce aggressive speeding? How does your officer, does he have a magic wand or does she have a magic wand that says stop?
You give out tickets.
Tickets.
Yeah.
Okay.
Unfortunately, that's the best way to do it.
They did 13 tickets on 7th North Street in like a 6-hour period, and 3 warnings. So this would be more traffic details, correct?
Yeah, it would absolutely be that. Yep.
And I know this isn't on the agenda, Chief, but I want to ask you, because it's coming up, since we're going to have more detail, and I'm going to say this again, out there around the circle in the Inner Harbor, prom is coming, all that stuff is coming. They're going to clog up that circle, and I'm curious, because I really wish that we could charge each school district a set amount of money. No, you smiling, I'm dead serious, because we need traffic control, and we shouldn't have to provide all the traffic control when they're coming from all over the county. to clog up that street.
Okay.
Fire can't get down that street, nor medical personnel will be able to get down those streets. And that bothers me, and I've been complaining now for the last 3 years.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Other questions?
So item number 34 is some equipment that we already purchased this equipment. It's night vision equipment, and we're asking for money.
Item 31?
Oh, sorry, did I miss one?
Yeah. Again, the podium is too tall, right? Yeah.
It is 31.
So 31, Chief.
31.
Yeah.
It's 31.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I thought I had.
What did I,
You know what?
what did I say, 32? Oh, all right, okay. It's the podium, I'm telling you, the podium. Item 31 is some, we already purchased this equipment. It's night vision equipment. And we're asking for this money, $7,500, to bring in instructors to train on the specific equipment. It's very specific training. We looked all over the country for trainers that train in this. We found some in Florida, Arizona, Texas. The closest we could find was Ohio. So there's no one in New York State that does this training. We're going to use this money to bring them to us instead of sending 30, 40 people out to this training. We're going to bring these trainers in so they can train our ERT team on this night vision equipment.
So that's like, that, as they say in England, what it says on the tin, it's night vision like the night for when you guys are doing like a SWAT type operation or something, or?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's not happening.
Oh, cool.
That's not happening.
Okay.
Any other questions on 31?
Can we borrow them?
No, that's, any other questions on 31?
No, they just did silly.
And 32, I'm gonna hold it for committee meeting, Chief.
Okay, good. That was going to be Michael Collins's anyway, so.
Yeah, I'm gonna set up.
Oh, we don't get to hear from Chief Trudell. He's looking
And
sharp,
Chief,
man. Cleans up
Chief,
good.
Chief and Deputy Mayor, could we invite Liberty Resources when we have the committee meeting for 32?
Yes, we absolutely can.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, thanks.
Exciting.
All righty. Counselor Allen.
Thank you. I have items 33 and 34. I'm assuming. Okay.
Afternoon, councilors. Michelle Sabansky, Deputy Commissioner of Neighborhood Development. Item 34 is to allocate $800,000 from the American Rescue Plan Act and enter into an agreement with the Center for Court Innovation, also known as the Syracuse Peacemaking Center, to continue to manage a community ambassador program that we have been working with them on. This program is something that we have been working with the Peacemaking Center on for, it's kind of grown out of work that's been taking place since about 2019. We have originally got a grant from the New York State Attorney General's office to do a series of community engagement around housing needs that residents had and code enforcement challenges that they might be having. As a result of all that engagement that took place in 2019, the findings for that were that we needed to think about kind of some strategic programming that we could implement that would help us to improve housing, health, and safety, increase kind of understanding of tenants' rights and responsibilities and awarenesses of code enforcement systems and processes, and then also to improve relationships between all of the stakeholders that exist within the code enforcement system, so tenants, landlords, and code inspectors themselves. We have been working, we got approximately $900,000 from the AG's office in early 2020 to implement a pilot program for the Community Ambassador Program. About half of those funds were allocated directly to the Peacemaking Center for the program management. The other half of those funds were allocated towards specific legal resources within the city, so to try to do some additional strategic work within the BAA to increase compliance kind of on that end for particular code enforcement issues where people are failing to comply. We are now at the end of the original grant term for the Ambassador Program, and so we are asking to issue another allocation from ARPA to be able to continue the program for an additional 2 years. The proposal that is submitted would allow us to continue the work that the ambassadors are doing, assisting with outreach to residents, also assisting with different types of case management, and direct outreach that they're doing on behalf of code enforcement, for particularly around properties where we're looking to get in an inspection in the property, so where the property owner may not have consented to the interior inspection themselves. Having the ambassadors go out and let the tenants know kind of what's happening, ask them if they're...
Ambassadors.
There's 4 total.
So this is a lot of information to digest in this short period of time. So I am going to do a committee meeting on this, because I do believe it's Kathleen, right? Okay. Colleen? Okay. Because I know I met with them, and it was a lot of information to kind of take in. So I want to be able to really digest the information. So I'm going to call a committee meeting for this one.
I'm having knee surgery next week, so if we could do it.
You said you're having what?
I'm having knee surgery next week.
Okay. Okay. So we'll talk offline and we can schedule a date. The one quick question though, so originally it was like $500,000. So that is totally, you guys completed the $500,000 budget that you had?
Over the 2-year period. So,
Okay.
yep. And there's a couple particular increases of services that are being provided within this contract that was not within the scope of the original contract. So I can speak to that in more detail at the hearing.
Okay, and then you just give us that. So we'll reach out to you and try to schedule a meeting that coordinates with everybody's schedule so they can be there as well. Okay?
Is this a 2-year period as well for the 800?
Yep, this would be another 2-year period.
All right, thank you. All right, and item 34.
I asked that question.
I didn't hear what she said.
Good afternoon, Medea Salkage, Permits Director. Item 34 is a permission for encroachment for an existing 4-foot tall chain link fence encroaching into the Martin Street right-of-way. It's located at 130 Martin Street for a single-family residence. So,
okay, the name kind of threw me off. I thought it was a theater, but this is for actual home residents.
Palace. He owns the palace.
This is the 2nd Council District. I approve.
You approve? Well, if Hogan approves, then it's approved. We don't even need to vote on it. Hogan's.
No, don't vote.
All right, any questions? You can send them to Councilor Hogan.
cool. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
And before Councilor Driscoll, Michael Collins, can I ask you another question? I'm full of questions today, because we get a lot of...
I'm always happy to answer your questions, Madam
We
President.
get a lot of emails, and I had talked to the administration earlier, right? So I know that a lot of housing projects are coming up. And I know that we get a lot of complaints about some of the housing projects. So how do we make these developers accountable for the development that they do? The maintenance, the security. I've gotten quite a few emails about maintenance and security that they're not keeping up with the property. And they'll be the first ones to try to evict these folks, but they're not doing what they're supposed to do. How do we deal with that?
So it's an important question that you're raising, because we've got the issue of both the quality of the housing from a structural standpoint, as well as the quality of the management. So when you look at, we look at it a few different ways. We've got the smaller properties for which the rental registries is an important tool for us to be able to make sure that we're dealing with being able to keep up on the structure of the property. We work very closely with the police department around nuisance abatement when there's behavior issues that are criminal that are related to the property. And we've got our certificate of compliance when it comes to the larger properties. What we really look to do whenever we are hearing of complaints, and so you can think of it two ways. What are we doing on the front end when there's a project that's planned, to make sure that the planning is such that the management of it will work well, and then what happens when there's problems. So to your point about the problems once they've arisen, the ambassador program that Deputy Commissioner Skapansky talked about is one of the ways in which we find out about problems before they actually reach government, before anybody calls you, before anybody calls us.
Okay, but not to cut you off, so is there a way we can find out about the problems before they happen? Let's put a clause in there, because Aspen, I'm gonna come back to Aspen. I got calls about Aspen. That's a huge complex. That's a huge build. So should it not have been maybe a clause that the city could hold the owners responsible for lack of what they're not doing? I'm just putting a plug out here for all these developers. If you can't do what you're supposed to do in the city of Syracuse, then maybe you don't need to develop.
So to that point, one of the, I think most important tools that we created within the last year, Deputy Mayor Owens created the high occupancy monitoring and enforcement programs, the HOME program. So when we know we've got problem buildings, we show up with code enforcement, with police, with fire, with corporation counsel, and make sure that we are engaging. We often have the community ambassadors set up to be able to engage us with people that are in the buildings so that we can comprehensively look at where these problems are and hold the owners accountable. And I would point to Parkside as a place where we've seen positive progress for this. Community ambassadors were the ones that were able to make sure that we got into the apartments that we wanted to see. We were able to create enough pressure that ownership came into town and had to look at the issues from our perspective rather than their own management's perspective. And we have seen a significant change in the way that they've hired a security person that's full-time now. We've seen changes to the structure. They're putting in much higher quality doors for the entrances of the buildings. Code enforcement is coming up. So the home unit has been highly effective in being able to address problems like this, to the point where we're actually seeing some buildings come off of that list. And what that does is it allows us to then go after other buildings and say, hey, look, there's only one way forward for you, and that's compliance.
If I could just add, Commissioner, Council President, there are two conversations. So one is Parkside is an example of a owner who also is the manager. So they employ all the managers. But then there are other examples when the developer comes in, they develop the property, and then they subcontract the management of the facility to another company. So ultimately, the owner of the property is responsible. So our avenue always starts with who is on the ground on a day-to-day basis. So if that's a management company, that's fine, and we will relay our concern to the management company. The preemptiveness of what you're asking is, I don't know if it's possible, because we get the information because of complaints. So you're telling us there are complaints, as soon as you let us know, we'll follow up. If it's a management company problem, then we hold the owner accountable that you have a management company that is not doing what you say that you expect them to do. If it's the owner, then like in Parkside Commons, we deal directly with them. I actually rather it be the owner because we don't have a conduit. And the result at Parkside Commons, and I'm hoping that the district council is seeing some of this, is that security measures are going in, new doors are going in. They're being very responsive to what we've come to them about. Third-party management companies are tricky because they're...
We can't clause them? We can't put a clause in that?
Saying what?
Basically that if they have 4 strikes and they're not compliant.
We'll hold the owner responsible to every other ordinance, code enforcement, building code responsibility, nuisance abatement, there has to be. The difference is that who are we talking to on a day-to-day basis depends on whether it's the owner or the management company.
Because housing is very important. We understand that, but it's important to have good, safe housing. And then we get so much shabby housing that everybody around this table probably get letters all week about the condition of the housings they're living in.
Well, having a sound management company is most important. So as we talk about development and we have pre-development meetings, that's a question we ask. Who do you plan on managing the company? And if names come up that send red flags, we say that's a red flag for us because they don't have a good track record.
I know, I just want the developers to hear me.
Oh, okay.
Latoya, I just want to backtrack. Do you think we can do the committee meeting with the meeting tomorrow? Add on to it?
If we have enough time. Which one is tomorrow?
Well, I'll check, I'm gonna check the availability tomorrow, see if she available. I have,
she's going on surgery.
Yeah. I don't know if she's here.
She's still here.
What day's your surgery, Michelle?
Well, that's kind of
It's
personal.
against HIPAA rules, isn't it?
I'm violating HIPAA protocol.
Yeah, violation all day.
Only why I say that because I had the opportunity to work with the peacemaking, and they were the first ones that went up in those buildings on the East Side Commons and gathered the people together. And I watched how they have helped out a lot of community members and families. So I just would like for everyone to hear what they do, because I personally had opportunity to see what they did in the community.
Yeah, it is to everyone's benefit if the deputy commissioner is able to do it, but we got to get her knee fixed so she can keep running with the way that she's been doing all her work. So, okay, thanks.
All righty.
Because we have to have a certain time notice for public, right? Don't you have to have a certain, 24 hours?
24 hours.
Yeah, 24 hours. All righty, Counselor Driscoll, you have the rest of the book.
Let's rock and roll. All right, 3536, we are holding because we're still working on a program, if I'm not mistaken, with Director Dunham. Yeah, that's correct. 3738, we want to talk about slurry seal now. We have the 1 o'clock meeting on Monday. Anything we need to say about slurry seal? It's oil. It goes on the road. Appropriate funds, ARPA.
So you're holding 37?
No, I think it'll be good to go. We have a public hearing right before the vote on Monday, I think, 1 o'clock.
Okay. You know I don't like it, right? But okay, let's go.
Yeah, so what's the ARPA 139? Oh, yeah, that's a committee meeting that starts right after this? I had committee written next to it, and I couldn't remember what that
Start after
indicated.
what, this meeting?
40 through 51, I know Tom Farrar is here. These are all, number 40 through 51 are all similar items, so I'll let Tom elaborate on that.
Sure. I'm Tom Farrar. I'm the Director of Facilities for the school district, and I know we're tight on time. So for those of you that have been watching us renovate our schools, we're in the second phase of JSCB, Joint School Construction Board. It's $300 million worth of work, and we'll soon be starting our joint school construction phase 3. If you want the real old history, ask Councilor Hogan. He'll tell you from the start. If you want the recent history, talk to President Hudson. She's on the board now and can give you. But what we're talking about today, we also do projects outside of the Joint School Construction Board. And with these contracts, we last did these in 2018. These are what we call term contracts. And it's funny, I've had a couple conversations with counselors. We have some ARPA money, just like you folks. We've also got some refinancing money. We also are allowed to bond $1 million a year for capital projects outside of JSCB. So we're lumping all those monies together and have a bunch of projects that we're going to be coming to you to do. A bunch of them are on the CIP that we do every year with Mr. Rudd, so that's in there already. We have one project that we will announce next Monday at the operations work session for the school district. I can't really say it until Monday, but we do have a project. So what these contracts are is basically they allow us to hire an architect or an engineer. There's 12 of them. We had 15 firms submit, and they're not guaranteed. So basically we choose a firm, and I get a proposal from the firm. I submit it to the city engineer. Once it's acceptable to the district, we do what's called a work order, and then we go forward. If we have to bond for the project or need financing, we come to you folks for the approval. So again, we usually use these for over 3 or 4 years. We also use these for non-construction projects like we do. The state requires us to do lead and water testing. We do that. We may use these for fire inspections. So with that, I'll see if there's any questions.
So you may not, we're approving up to, I guess first one, you mentioned you sometimes use, in this situation, ARPA money or bonding. What are you using, where is this funding coming out of? This
is going to come out of all of that. So there might be 40 projects done under these contracts. Okay. So we could have one vendor on here do one project, or they could do 4 or 5, depending on the fees. And because these are unpredictable projects, that's what it's for. When we have a big project, then we do the normal RFP process. So like our building condition survey that we did was about $1 million fee. We did that through the normal RFP process with the city, and then we come to you folks for award on that. The school board approved this. The committee that was on here, very helpful, and suggested we go with all these contracts just because they know we have a lot of work coming. This gives us a lot of flexibility down the road. That's why if you look at the resolution from 2018, I think there was like 7 or 8 firms, and there wasn't as much money as these.
Having dealt with Tom over the years, I mean, give him as much flexibility as possible, dealing with all those buildings of varying ages and everything else, and structural deficiencies sometimes, so.
Yeah, I'm going to pay for that JSCB one comment later, I know it, so.
I'm good. Any other, my fellow counselors, any questions for these?
Okay, thank you, look forward to
Keep up
working
the
with
good work, Tom, thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
Appreciate it. 52, I believe that's Mary.
Hello again. 52 is requesting authorization to do a building and facilities assessment of city-owned buildings. We're proposing to look at City Hall, all the fire stations, training and maintenance center, police maintenance garage, parks buildings, and public works. We would go, we're looking to put an RFP out, obtain a consultant, have them look at approximately 50 of our buildings. That's not all of our buildings, but 50 of them, do a cursory assessment, and then pick the high priority buildings that have needs or need to be looked at further, and then develop a, basically an asset management system of all our buildings so that we can prioritize repairs across all city-owned buildings.
Just to clarify, Mary, like Counselor Green had brought up the concept of evaluating all of our real estate, kind of, this is more just focusing on improvement, and we're
This
we're
is
not
the
assessing it for-
condition. This
yeah,
is
just
evaluating the condition. So
strictly-
right now, different departments, when they put their capital plan together, they each individually say what projects they want to do. So this would kind of put everybody into the same playing field, and we would address the most dire needs first.
So this is just focusing strictly on improvements in-
Right,
in the
but it's
capital
not,
plan.
it isn't all the buildings, like we're not doing the water department, or the community centers, or the parking garages.
Do you have a list of all the 50 buildings so we can see what that looks like for new counselors?
I have a preliminary list that it's dated at this point, because like City Hall Commons is probably not going to be evaluated, and it's a preliminary list. I can probably share that with you, but it is, you know, it's just what we think right now. We will make adjustments.
When was the last time it was done, this assessment, or has it ever been done?
I don't believe it's ever been done,
Okay.
or it hasn't been done since I've been here in the 1980s.
It's terrific.
Hmm?
It's terrific that you're doing this. It's amazing.
So sure, I'll send you our database of where we preliminary thought we would look.
Awesome.
Good stuff. Any other questions, fellow counselors? Nope. Rock and roll. Thank you, Mary. That
All
sounds
right,
great.
thank
Good
you.
stuff. Number 53 is the confirmation of the appointment of Douglas Daly. I looked at his resume. It looks quite extensive.
It's like
25 pages.
It's War and Peace.
Yeah.
Are you
War and
kidding
Peace.
me?
My goodness.
Yeah.
Dude's got accomplishments.
Okay, no.
I've been on the Ochre board for about 3 or 4 years, so he's in for a treat. The thrills come at you a mile a minute when you're on that board, so. My resume is actually 28 pages. I'm slightly more qualified than Mr. Daly. My academic criteria is just unbelievable, off the charts. 28 is really sliding me when you get down to it. Okay, moving on. 54, I believe the rest of the items are Commissioner Awald's, yes? 54 through 57, if you want to give us quick summaries of those.
Yes, I'll be as quick as I can. Joe Awald, Commissioner of Water. 54 is to apply and enter an agreement with New York State Archives. This is a grant to archive a lot of our paper data that we have stored in the back office. We want to digitize it so we don't lose any integrity of it. Any questions on that?
But you don't like paper anymore, Commissioner?
Less paper, the better for me.
Okay.
55. This is a no-cost extension to our old engineering services contract. We had our previous consultant, and they were wrapping up some of their work. Their work went past the deadline of the contract, but they finished it, and we just need to finalize payments. So this is just a no-cost extension.
Okay.
Okay. 56 is based on the committee review, enter into contract with GHD for the Guilford Pump Station, the Brookford Pump Station, and the Westminster Avenue Pump Station Replacement Project. They're going to be doing the design to replace all of these. Any questions? Okay. 57, last one. Same thing, based on committee review, enter into a contract with EDR to design and replace the Skinny Atlas Creek weir, which we utilize to maintain a certain amount of flow coming from Skinny Atlas Lake into the creek, which we're required by New York State DEC.
Forgive my ignorance, what is the weir?
The weir is it's a concrete structure which we can measure flow based on how much flow is going over the top of it, based on engineering data.
That work for you, Hogan?
Well, I just was applying it to other things.
Okay. Also a founding member of the Grateful Dead. All right.
All righty.
That should do it.
All right, that's all I got.
Any
Thank you.
questions, counselors, on those items? I'm happy to call my items a wrap, President.
And I'm happy to ask for a motion to adjourn.
Motion adjourned.
So moved. Second? All in favor? Aye. All righty, see you at the meeting.
DPW now, right?
What's that?
Is there a DPW now?
Yeah.